When talking about tube processing, it's basically trying to emulate the signal being amplified by a tube. And by the time we got, solid state transistors operating in amplifiers, the only thing that was available to amplify a signal was a tube. It's basically like a light bulb with vacuum in it and electrical elements, the cathode, anode, and a mesh in between them, which is like the simplest form of a tube. But basically what happens is that we are trying to amplify a signal. We are controlling a strong electricity signal with a weak one, okay? And what happens there is that there are electrons traveling within that vacuum from the cathode to the anode being controlled by the mesh. So physically, only a certain portion of electrons can travel at a time. So if the signal becomes too loud, there's no more amount of electrons that can physically travel at a given moment, meaning that we do have some saturation, we do have some reduction in the gain of a signal at that point. So what happens there is some saturation, soft saturation, by the way, and the tube is actually adding harmonics by doing that. So by changing the waveform, it's adding harmonics, linear ones, by the way, of course, unless we push too hard, at which point we really get to distortion, which we can see right here. So I have Saturn loaded with a clean tube emulation. Just wanted to show you what that sounds like. And before we hear it on a song, I wanted to show you what that actually looks like. And I'm just going to open Span to show you. I'm going to play a sine wave with this tube enabled. Okay, so I'm going to play a sine wave. Let's play it first with the tube bypassed, just like this. So let's see the Span. Okay, so I will play a sine wave with the Saturn bypassed so that you can see what a sine wave looks like on the analyzer right here. So that's a sine wave, a single discrete frequency right there. Okay. Now, if I enable Saturn and now play the same sine wave, look at that. So it's adding harmonics to that sine wave. Whatever this frequency is, let's see, 261 approximately. The next harmonic it's adding is 523. Look at that. It's exactly double. And again, it's exactly 3 times that, 778. Approximately 3 times the initial frequency. So it is adding harmonics to our signal. Now, what's going to happen to a song when we play it? Just like this. So let's try it with and without. I'm actually going to just bypass that process so you can hear the song with it and without it. So without it first. Without it. And with it. So I just wanted to divert your attention to what to listen to. So when enabling saturation, of course, unless we overdo it, the difference is going to be subtle. But that fullness that you get and kind of a control, because it also does control the transient somewhat, is the actual effect of a tube. So what it basically sounds like to me is it makes things more stable, more controlled, a tiny bit, of course, and it makes everything sound richer because it's adding harmonics to the entire signal. Just like it did with that sine wave, it's doing the same thing with the entirety of this song. So it's adding harmonic content to the entirety of this song. If I overdo that, you can hear that turns into distortion quite quick. Now without it. And you have different types of tubes here, so different emulations, warm, broken. Depends on the sound you want, and each one of those is going to give you probably different types of harmonics. So let me open Span and let's play the sine wave through a different type of tube. Wait just a second, let me reset this. Okay, so through a different type of tube like this. Let's look at those harmonics. And now if I change the tube type, like so, just a second. Let me change the tube type to clean. you see, the amplitudes of those harmonics change, meaning that different amplitudes of different harmonics make the character of that tube. Okay? So different types of tubes have different types of amplitudes for those harmonics being added. Hence, there's like a color that's being added to it. So different tubes add different colors in exactly that fashion. What I would suggest is that you experiment, always listen with your ears, of course. Seeing it on the screen does not mean that it's always good. Okay, so overdoing it is bad. Adding a ton of harmonics to something that does not need it is also bad. But done tastefully, it can be really beneficial. It can take your track to sounding that tiny bit more polished. So that last 1%, where you say, oh, this really sounds, studio quality great or whatever. It's basically, collection of many different things being done to a mix or a master. So consider this tube processing, that emulation of a sound going through a tube, something that might be desirable. Not always, but it might be desirable in a specific case. On this song, I might use it, but quite less than right there. So just a tiny bit of that tube saturation.